Sorry, we're going to start over. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shoshanna Gross. I'm the Major Events Manager with the Ohio Restaurant Association, and I'm here today with our President and CEO, John Barker.
Hey,
Hi,
Shoshanna.
John.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
This is our daily dose, so we're going to talk to you all today about a few things that are happening at the ORA and in the restaurant, food service, and hospitality industry. We're going to get started today with our weekly poll. This is something that we have been doing since the very beginning, since the middle of March. And so we have a lot of really great data kind of going through the whole pandemic shutdown and into businesses reopening. John, what does the poll tell us this week?
Well, Shoshanna, one of the things we've tracked from the very beginning under your leadership, which has been great, is sort of how are sales doing. Now, we've added some questions over time that seem to be more relevant as we've done the survey over 3 months or so. But on the sales side, we really want to look at it versus a year ago. And then we kind of look at the trend, like what's happening since everything got shut down from dining in. And, on the sales side, we're getting a little better each week. It's not startlingly better, but it's better. And so one of the things we track is there's a group of restaurants that tell us their sales are down between -20% and more than 70%. So that's a pretty big range, but we lump that together so we can look at it sort of week by week. And by the way, those numbers are versus a year ago. And you remember, just like 3 weeks ago, more than 2/3 of the restaurants reporting were in that terrible range. It has now dropped to 60% of restaurants reporting. Now that's still not great, but we are inching forward sort of each week. And that's the data we get. And then anecdotally, as members of our team talk to our members around the state, we're hearing similar things. I mean, it's getting slightly better each week as they do things to try to entice customers to come back and make sure that people feel comfortable when they come in with all the procedures, which we can talk a little bit about. So we're happy to see that. We're also encouraged that right around 80% of the restaurants have reopened for their dining in or patios, which is good. And about another 9% have been telling us they're going to reopen soon. So that would get us to about 90%, the restaurants in the state being reopened for dining. And that leaves, though, about 10% that say they're not going to reopen. And so that number includes people who are closing permanently and those who are just delaying a little bit further for various reasons. And it could be everything from PPE to, where they are, sort of location-wise, things like that. So those are some of the real big issues. In terms of the sales, we think as we really drill down and talk to operators, it's a couple things. It's capacity issue that they feel they have because of social distancing requirements. And our poll told us that about 40% of the people responding say that they're only at half the capacity they used to be, meaning that if they used to be able to have 100 people in their restaurant, now they're somewhere around 40 to 50. That's the max they can fit in any time. And so that's a real issue. But another 30% are somewhere between half and 3/4 full. So what they've done is they've used things like barriers or putting plexiglass or drapes made out of plastic. And I saw tons of different examples of this, both on photographs and as we visited folks. And so, I think that's important, doing all those things. And plus outdoor dining can help. If you didn't do outdoor dining before, and now you can construct some sort of a, temporary summertime outdoor dining, that expands your capacity as well and gives consumers a choice. They can still do carry out, they can still do delivery, they can still come in and be separated. And this is all important. Yesterday, a piece of information came out, Shoshanna, that we were looking at. Quinnipiac University does a poll on a number of different issues. Typically, it's around political issues, but they did ask a question: how many what percent of people are comfortable going to a restaurant or a bar? And interestingly, 55% of the people responding said they're now comfortable going to a restaurant, and that's up significantly from where it was in some polls we saw not that long ago. But that tells you there's still a fair amount of people who are not. So that's the first is a capacity issue, and then the second is just we know there's not as many people going out, and
right.
That'll just have to come over time. And of course, as restaurateurs, we can help a little bit with that as well.
Yeah, so, restaurateurs persevere. We certainly have been seeing that through this. And you mentioned that the ORA has been out visiting our members. This is part of our Ohio Works Here tour. It's something we've been doing prior to, the beginning of the year. and we're continuing it now that restaurants are back open and running. This has given you a great opportunity to kind of see how people are solving for social distancing rules. What are some of the best practices that you've seen?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that we've talked to all of them is you got to make sure when that customer looks at your restaurant through whatever lens they look at it through, whether it's online or your social media, you got to make sure your messaging is right there. Hey, we're open. Here's how we're open. Here are the hours that we're open. And maybe even a few visuals of what's going to happen when you come into the restaurant, right? That you're going to be, coming in, there's no queue lines the way it used to be, or there's somebody meeting you at the door and walking you to the table and they have face covering on. Just like all those visual cues that give people a little more confidence. And, we've seen in all the restaurants that we have visited, they have been very good at making sure that they are showing that they're following the state guidelines, the Dine Safe orders, right? They have signage up, they have some of the Dine Safe materials up. They also have signage on the floor about stand here, walk here, those things that we've seen and talked about. All of our members that we have visited also are displaying the Ohio Restaurant Promise, which is their commitment, between them and the, and the customers that are coming in, and importantly, their employees. So their employees feel as safe as they can. All three, the ones we visited yesterday, we were at Ohio Works Here tour around the Columbus area. We visited a Zoop franchisee. We visited the original Pancake House and Schmidt's down in German Village. And, we'll be doing these kinds of things, ongoing throughout the summer. They all had the signage. Many of them, all of them had the plexiglass dividers in between booths and things like that. Also at the station where you pay, if that's a situation. So those are just smart things to do. They had detailed procedures. They talked about the procedures they put in place with their employees, and everybody in the restaurant was wearing their face covering that we saw. And so those are all the cues that give consumers confidence, even if the consumer doesn't necessarily want to talk about it, right? You can just tell that more and more people are going to want to make sure they see that. And it's interesting that in all three of these locations, what they said is after consumers come back for the first time, they tell the manager or the server, we're more comfortable to come back again. So they're seeing their numbers. Two of the three restaurants that we visited, their numbers are coming back very strongly. In fact, one of the three was all the way back to 90% of the sales that they had this time a year ago. Now they've done some really, but they're doing carry out. They're now doing delivery. They have some outdoor dining. They've taken their service levels to a whole nother level. And so that's the kind of commitment that I think restaurants they're gonna have to think through this and really get out there and do it so that they can push higher on their sales front, try to get back towards that break even. That's one of the things in our poll yesterday, Shoshanna, that we put out in our daily memo, that only about 20% of the operators feel confident they can get back to break even because they got to make up in many cases for 3 months of sales. But if you can start getting up to 60, 70, 80, 90% of your sales a year ago, that's going to give you at least, a running start as we get towards the end of the year and then into 2021.
Yeah, it certainly gives you a lot of hope that more restaurants than we originally were thinking would be able to survive this are going to be able to figure out ways to stay in business, which is ultimately the goal here.
It's not business as normal, clearly, right? And it's tough in these environments to feel confident and do these type of things. But restaurant owners that we talk to now who are doing these things say they feel an obligation, right, to be part of the economic recovery. They want to stay open and be viable for their families, for their employees' families, right? They want to make sure that it's a place where customers can go and have nourishment. And of course, we kid around that nourishment is food, but in many cases, the words they use for us, the nourishment is also getting food from a restaurant, even if it's delivered, or actually going to a restaurant and having that human contact again, even if it's 6 feet away from each other. So
yeah, it's that sense of community that restaurants provides for so many of us. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in talking about the economic recovery and restaurants being a part of it, I know that we've had some new statistics come out today. Did you want to talk a little bit about what you learned?
Yeah, for the stats geeks like me, this is like, red meat, but GDP in the first quarter was down 5%. That's kind of what everybody expected. Second quarter is projected to be down. That's going to be the big down quarter. We think it's going to be down about 30%, but almost all signals are showing, because businesses are coming back, that we'll begin the recovery in the third quarter. And then all bets are all over the place on what the third and fourth quarter are going to be like. But
Mhm.
it's kind of makes sense, right? Because more and more things are open now, not just in Ohio, but across the US. And so, and to give you some context for that 5% down in the first quarter, kind of the worst we've seen in more recent times is back in the 2008 economic, downturn. The GDP was down 8.4% for a quarter. So it's much better than that. But the 30% we're going to see in the second quarter is just sort of everything that hit, right? When you think about April and May, when everything got shut down, and then things are being reopened, and so it'll start to come back. Good news on jobless claims. They were about 34,000 in Ohio this week, and and so that's not a great number. But the total amount of people filing for jobless claims is down by 314,000, and that compares to the peak that we hit in April. So fingers crossed that although there are still going to be some layoffs, that more and more people are going to be called back to work, whether they're working at home or, in our case, in restaurants. So that's good. And on a national basis, we had about 1.48 million initial jobless claims across the United States, but that's lower than the week before, which was 1.4 million. So again, those are big numbers, but you got to look at these things in trends and which way are they going and why. And we got to keep bringing that number down. We have about a total of 19.5 million people unemployed right now in the United States as it's reported. And we got to keep bringing that number down because that'll just fuel the whole economy, and both the online economy and then the in-person economy.
Okay. Good information to have. Good to be staying up on where we are as a state and also as a country. I think it's really helpful to kind of see how Ohio is sitting in a larger, within the larger perspective. So the ORA has been really active throughout all of this, and we continue to develop new programming. We're continuing to work on our messaging and our support of our members. So what's happening at the ORA right now?
So we continue to do these kind of things, right? We laughingly call it the daily dose. We don't do these every day, but we do some sort of communication via social media every day. Some of them is the form of these videos. Some of it is when we go out and visit people. Sometimes it's just really good social media about a member, right? That's doing something. We want to make sure people know about it. So our job is to promote the heck out of this industry, and we're going to continue to do that. That's one of our most important roles, right? To make people feel good about the restaurant industry and give them reason for hope. And so we'll continue to do that. We've been doing the daily reports. We're over 100 daily reports since this started, Shoshanna, and that's been quite an effort by our entire team. And, we're going to continue doing that. Although we did ask, and, we're going to ask our members, would you like to have these things 7 days a week, 5 days a week, 3 days a week, once a month, once a week, and just make sure that we're on par with what expectations are now that people are busy and back to work. And so we'll make any appropriate adjustments on that. I know we've done some great webinars, and you've really been driving that. I know we had one this week around the PPP, and how'd that go for folks?
It was great. We partnered with the William Vaughn Company, who's been a really great support to us. They were big supporters of the Mid-America Restaurant Expo that happened a lifetime ago, and also in February, which just seems like eons away. But we've been really happy to bring them back in to provide some information around their expertise, which is they're an accounting firm. So talking about the PPP Flexibility Act that was passed most recently, the new guidelines that have come out from the Small Business Association as a result of that. And they've actually created this really fantastic loan calculator where you can go in and put in your own payroll expenses, all of your qualifying expenses, and kind of see where your forgiveness is at. And then you can adjust accordingly to try to get as much for loan forgiveness as you can so that you're not in a position of having to pay those dollars back. We had a great turnout. We're going to continue to be presenting this kind of information along with other best practices, government affairs information, anything that people are asking us for or that we see as being a trending or important topic in the industry. It's something that we have an obligation to do when we're able to meet in person. And now that we're not meeting in person, we're really working hard to create content that's still valuable for membership and anyone else who's interested in viewing it.
Yeah, no, and I know you're working on a schedule, looking out, really over the summer and what makes sense. What do our members really need? I know the PPP, there almost can't be enough information on that because it keeps changing and people are now trying to figure out how do they do the forgiveness. And so that webinar is important. We know that GBQ, one of our partners, continues to do those kind of things, as well as Kegler Brown, one of our law firms, and others that we've partnered with because they have a lot of experts in these areas. And so we can continue to help with that, and we will. I also know that we continue to feature some of the great webinars by the National Restaurant Association because they've done a number of those, and we can pass those on to our members and highlight those so people can see that. One of the ones you and I have talked a little bit about is perhaps featuring the Multicultural Food Service Forum, which is a direct partner of ours and the National Restaurant Association. So we're just beginning those talks to what information can we bring to owners and operators as we all kind of try to work through these issues that are facing the United States. But our businesses, we're right on the front line as restaurants that employ so many people, including, we are the diversity, poster child, for America in terms of people that work in restaurants. And so we have that responsibility, and we're going to try to do our part on that, and look forward to that. I also can tell you that we're very proud to put together a ton of PPE resources, and that continues to be something that we highlight. And it's really everything from sanitizer to face coverings to plexiglass to printing services and all types of other services, which you can find on our website. And if somebody has a question, let us know. Or if you have a service you'd like us to consider, putting on that becoming a vendor, let us know, because all that's important. And then Shoshanna, one of the things we're going to continue to do is on the political front. You mentioned, we've done some webinars on that, but we continue to press on a number of issues. Just yesterday, Todd Bowen on our team was testifying at the State House on what we call the liability topic, right? Because for businesses to have liability protection as they reopen and have some kind of shield that they don't have tremendous amount of lawsuits, that could end up, really closing businesses if there's not some sort of right kind of protection. We're working on that, both on the front for statewide and at the federal level as well, trying to put together something that's smart, but doesn't put up a shield that if somebody does something purposely, you know what I mean? We're not looking for that, but just in everyday due course of running a business. And then lastly, we know if there's not some additional tranche of federal support for our industry, it's going to be very difficult. We've already had some good talks with both of our senators, and some Congress members are beginning to think about this as well, because there's conversations about a phase 4 of the CARES Act. And if there's going to be, we certainly want to be in the middle of all that and get the restaurant and hospitality industry in the middle of those discussions. Or be able to do some sort of specific thing for our industry. And we're having those talks. I've been in conversations with the National Restaurant Association and some of our other partners on that. More to come, but we know it's going to be important.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all this information, Don, and we will be back again soon.
Yeah, thanks.